Welcome aboard! We will be your guides during this magical journey into the movies. It's the perfect job for us because we love the movies. It's showtime! Ready when you are, CB!
Action!
Welcome to Monoreel Radio, episode number 289. I'm Sean.
And I'm Jackie.
And we are here this week to review and discuss The Princess and the Frog.
Finally!
2024 is a big year for The Princess and the Frog. Not only do we have its 15th anniversary coming up this fall, but this week marks the opening, at least at Walt Disney World, of Tiana's Bayou adventure, 4 years in the making.
This has also been quite a while in the making for us. We've been waiting to review this one since the inception of Monoreel Radio. We've been looking forward to it. I think the last time it had a big anniversary on its 10th, I think it was also the anniversary of Frozen. Or no, Frozen 2 was coming out, so we did Frozen instead, and we missed the 10th.
Yes.
So either way, we knew we were going to review it this year, and I have been very much looking forward to it because this is just such a huge film for Disney animation. Do you remember what it was like when they announced this?
For so many reasons. It was a more inclusive Disney princess, obviously, with the introduction of Tiana, but it was the return to traditional hand-drawn animation. And I think at the time, we all thought that we would see a little bit more traditional hand-drawn animation, and they've gone in the complete opposite direction.
Well, at the time, they were also going out with Home on the Range, which I have nothing but love for, but I know that a lot of people did not want it to go out like that. So I was very excited when they announced this. And I think what I remember the most, too, was for me personally, I had gone to New Orleans back in 2006, so 3 years before this came out. And you're talking about 4 years since Katrina. So it was also a very big deal to have a movie set in New Orleans at this time. And this is really the first fairy tale, the first Disney fairy tale that's not set in Europe. Like, yes, we've had Lady and the Tramp. And I'm sure, off the top of my head, there's a couple that I'm not thinking of. But as far as a traditional princess fairy tale, it was the first to come to the home soil.
Yeah, a lot to talk about here. Was moving it to the Bayou the right move? How does the music of this film sort of compare to some of the other Disney classics? And should we see more hand-drawn animation? That, on top of many other things, is what we are here to discuss today.
This episode is sponsored by Fierce Fox Co., designers of handmade silkscreen shirts. Fierce Fox has a t-shirt, tank top, hoodie, or crew neck for every fandom. So whether it's the movies or theme parks, princesses or villains, the MCU or Star Wars, everyone will find something they love. The designs range from subtle quotes from our favorite films to iconic characters we can wear proudly in so many different styles, such as sketchbook and concert tees. Listeners of Monoreel Radio can get a 20% discount using the code Monoreel at checkout. Visit fiercefoxco.com to check out all of the collections, including some really great Princess and the Frog t-shirts.
We are introduced to Tiana and her best friend Charlotte as children as Tiana's mother, Eudora, reads them the story of the Frog Prince. Eudora works as a seamstress, and her best customers are Charlotte and her wealthy father, Eli. Tiana and Eudora head home to make dinner with Tiana's father, James, who dreams of someday opening a restaurant. Tiana has a gift for cooking and shares her father's enthusiasm. Tiana wishes on the evening star for their dreams to come true, but James reminds her that hard work is also required, so Tiana grows up working double shifts at the restaurants that she works at, because she works at multiple, and saves her tips to open her restaurant and fulfill her now late father's dreams. When Eli and Charlotte eat breakfast at the restaurant that Tiana works at in the morning, Charlotte tells Tiana that Prince Naveen of Maldonia is visiting the city and is staying at the LaBouffe home and attending their masquerade ball. Charlotte, wanting to snag herself the prince, pays Tiana to make 500 of her man-catching beignets, giving Tiana enough money to buy her restaurant. She enters into an agreement to purchase the property that she wants, and her mother gifts her her father's old gumbo pot. Prince Naveen arrives in the city of New Orleans looking for a good time while also enjoying the city's jazz music, while his valet Lawrence reminds him that he must marry rich or find a job because he has been cut off from his very wealthy royal family. They meet the mysterious Dr. Facilier, who practices voodoo and promises to grant them both their wishes: green and riches for Naveen and power for Lawrence. The pair agree to do business with Facilier, who collects a drop of blood from Naveen, who then turns into a frog. At the ball, Charlotte impatiently waits for her prince to arrive, while Tiana learns that she has been outbid for her property, and she only has a few days to come up with the difference. A heartbroken Tiana wishes on the evening star like she did as a child and meets Prince Naveen in frog form. Remembering the story of the Frog Prince, Naveen promises Tiana a reward if she kisses him and returns him to human form. She does kiss him, but instead turns into a frog herself because she is not a princess. After chaos ensues at the ball, Naveen and Tiana escape, and we learn that Lawrence is appearing to be Naveen in human form, but only when he wears a talisman containing Naveen's blood. Facilier is furious when he learns that Naveen escaped because he and Lawrence have a deal where Lawrence, as Naveen, will marry Charlotte, so both of them can split the LaBeouf family fortune after Dr. Facilier kills Eli with a voodoo doll. Naveen and Tiana escape to the Bayou, where they learn that Tiana turned into a frog because, as I mentioned before, she is not a princess, and she also learns that Naveen was cut off by his royal parents and made a deal with the Shadow Man to help his situation. Tiana helps Naveen escape hungry alligators in exchange for him helping her buy her restaurant after he marries Charlotte. They meet Louis, an alligator, who wishes to play jazz on his trumpet. However, he scares humans because he is in fact an alligator, and he tells them about Mama Odie, an old voodoo queen living in the bayou. Naveen convinces Louis to take them to Mama Odie and turn all three of them into humans so that they can all have their dreams restored to them. The next day, while proposing to Charlotte, Lawrence starts to turn back into himself as Naveen's blood drains from the talisman. Without Naveen present to draw more blood, Facilier needs to ask his friends on the other side for help. Back in the Bayou, Tiana and Naveen meet a firefly named Ray, who tells them that Louis has been leading them in the wrong direction and that he and his family can lead them to Mama Odie. Meanwhile, Facilier promises his friends that they can take every soul in New Orleans once he and Lawrence kills Eli and takes his fortune, so the Shadow friends leave to find Naveen and bring him back. In the Bayou, Ray talks about his beloved Evangeline, the brightest firefly in the Bayou, and how they will one day be together. 3 hunters arrive to capture Naveen and Tiana, but they escape and Tiana makes swamp gumbo for themselves as well as Louis and Ray. They bond as Tiana shows Naveen how to mince mushrooms, while he admits to not knowing how to do anything. After dinner, Ray shows them Evangeline, who turns out to be the evening star, but no one wants to tell him the truth. Instead, they dance, and Naveen and Tiana develop feelings for each other. However, the Shadow arrives, and they believe that it's to capture Naveen, but it turns out that it's Mama Odie who scolds them for getting involved with the Shadow Man. She tells them that they need to figure out what they want versus what they need. She also shows them that Eli is the king of the Mardi Gras parade, meaning that Charlotte is a princess, but only until the Mardi Gras parade ends at midnight. Needing to act fast, they sneak aboard a riverboat where Louis is confused for a person with an alligator costume, and he is invited to play with the band. Naveen admits to being in love with Tiana and plans to propose to her. However, he is disheartened when all she can focus on is her restaurant, and he feels like he is really just a means to an end. He is then kidnapped by the Shadows, who return him to Facilier, and Lawrence, who take his blood again, restoring Lawrence to Naveen's form so he can marry Charlotte during the Mardi Gras parade. Ray tells Tiana about Naveen's plan to marry her instead of Charlotte and how he would get a job to help her buy her restaurant, so they go to the parade and see quote-unquote Naveen marrying Charlotte. A heartbroken Tiana tells Ray that wishes don't come true and that Evangeline is a star, not a firefly. Ray, refusing to believe this, leaves to prove that Naveen wants to marry Tiana. On the float, Ray finds Naveen captured and breaks him free. They interrupt the wedding and steal the necklace. The shadows pursue Ray, who has taken the necklace to Tiana. Ray is injured fighting the shadows before being stepped on by Dr. Facilier. Facilier, trying to convince Tiana not to destroy the necklace, offers to make her restaurant dreams come true. However, knowing what her father had versus what he wanted, she turns him down and destroys the talisman. Knowing that he can't repay his debts to the Shadow People, he is dragged to the other side. Charlotte sees Lawrence in true form and learns that Naveen and Tiana are now frogs. Charlotte offers to kiss Naveen and marry him to help get Tiana her restaurant, but Tiana stops him as they have found true love. The clock strikes midnight and Charlotte kisses him, no marriage required, but however they are too late. Ray dies and joins Evangeline as a fellow star, and Tiana and Naveen have a Bayou wedding. After they kiss, they turn back to human form because now, technically, Tiana is the Princess of Maldonia. Lewis intimidates the realtors into selling Tiana her restaurant, and Tiana's palace officially opens with Lewis and Naveen performing as musicians.
This movie just does so much. I don't even know where to start. Well, I kind of do. On a book, obviously. Not the traditional way where we see the Disney opening credits where they open it up, but I love how they bake the story of the Princess and the Frog that we all know right into this story. Such a smart choice to kick it off.
Very smart choice to kick it off, but I do want to call to attention the fact that when we saw this in the theaters, it was the traditional Disney opening credits with when it was hand-drawn animation and you would kind of trickle down the screen and the castle would appear.
The one that we grew up in.
Yes.
With our Disney Renaissance era.
They did that in the movies, but on Disney Plus, they completely eliminated that and went to the more modern Disney opening slate. Frankly, I wish that they would have left it alone. People of a certain age that grew up in that Renaissance era, when you see that, it unlocks something. Nostalgia, it brings you back to your childhood. I just don't understand why they changed it, because they were so intentional in making sure that it existed in the theatrical run. Why they would take it out of the Disney Plus, I don't understand.
I mean, I sort of get it if they're trying to make Disney Plus all look uniform, but they've not done it for every movie.
Correct. All right, let's jump back into the film, though. Like you said, you open up on the book. How endearing are all of these characters from the start?
Oh my gosh, right off the rip. I love Charlotte and Tiana's friendship. I mean, I just love Charlotte. She's hilarious. She is such great comic relief through this entire movie. And I love Eudora too. I love that they made her a seamstress, especially because when we meet Tiana's father, he's all about hard work and instilling that belief in Tiana. So being that we have both parents in this film, it's nice to see that they're both in this together. They're both working very hard for their family. It's not, a single parent where it's all on their shoulders. And it's not also that he's the one that's out working while she's taking care of Tiana. They both had to do it. And I think if they had put it all on him, it would have been a disservice to the story that they're telling and to the setting and the era that they're telling it in, because this is what life was like for people of color. And they both would have had to contribute to the finances in order to make it work, because there were such limited jobs that they could have at this time period.
I also think that it's smart that we didn't get the typical, we kill him off within the first 5 minutes of screen time, on brand for Disney. But the fact that he's alive in the start of the film, I think was very smart, because you could have just as easily had him dead from the beginning. And it could have been like, well, it's like Daddy used to say, or, your father used to say. You could always tell this in retrospect, but I don't think it would have served Tiana very well. I think that after a while, we would have gotten tired with the, I have to work hard, I have to work hard, I have to work hard. I think it's important that you, because the thing is, James is a character in the movie, but he's in it for such little time that I feel like he's less of a character in the movie and he's more a caricature of hard work. He's almost a caricature of what makes Tiana Tiana. And I think that it's smart to make it very personal by putting that on him.
I do agree with that, but I disagree that he's a caricature. I think it would have felt that way had they done it as a flashback, and I'm really glad that they didn't lean on that as a device and they chose to show us, not tell us, because it really gives us an understanding of why she wants to do this so badly. I mean, like, yes, that's obviously going to be her character development. It's going to be her motivation to open this restaurant, but it's so much more effective when we get to meet him for ourselves and we're not just being told through Tiana about her memories. But I also think it was equally as important to, you know, start in the present and flash forward to set up that relationship with Charlotte and her family and show how, you know, these two families from quite literally opposite sides of the tracks are in each other's lives, and they are both important parts of the community on their own. But to see them come together speaks to the theme of this movie and the greater message of the importance of community, regardless of the color of your skin. So I love that they set that up from the very beginning, showing the two girls as children and how they are involved in each other's lives. And it just lays such great groundwork for the rest of the movie. And I love the transition of this trolley ride back. You know, Charlotte demands another dress from Eudora, and it's so subtle. I don't know how they didn't play up on this more, that Charlotte just gets whatever she wants. And her dad is like, okay, but this is it, though. This is the last dress. Here's a puppy.
Yeah.
And it's just such a charming moment to show how she's got him wrapped around her finger because she doesn't have a mother figure to speak of.
Yeah.
But I just love the humor of that moment. And, you know, it's a very lighthearted moment. And then it gets a bit heavy again because we see Tiana and Eudora get on the trolley back to go home. And we see these really affluent houses fade into the distance. And then we get to their community. And I just thought that they handled that so well.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically shotgun shacks. It's what they look like. And I thought the colors are very different. The tone is different, but it's still happy. You know, it doesn't seem like a depressed area. You can just tell that it's not the same area. I'm throwing this out there now. There are critics of this film at the time of the film's release and still today that have an exact problem with what you just talked about. They don't like the fact. They said that it's glorifying what life was at the time, that it's glossing over what life was at the time. You're making a movie for children, and it's supposed to be happy. I understand. It's a work of historical fiction. It's not meant to be a documentary. It's not based on a true story. You don't need to show overt racism in an animated film that's meant for 5 and 6-year-old kids. I understand why people retrospectively, and even at the time, have an issue with Song of the South, because that was a plantation. Again, I think innocently you're trying to show that the children in that film didn't see skin color, which I think is a very important thing that gets lost, but that's different. That was a plantation. This is a completely different setting. I just think that it's sad that in a world where you're trying to teach kids not to see skin color, you have a film that accomplished that here, and yet people are upset about it because they feel like it's been glossed over what the real issues at the time were. And I think that that's worth mentioning.
I can guarantee you any critic who has said that has never been to New Orleans, because I think that the setting of this film is just as important as telling the story. Because I mentioned that I had gone there 3 years before this came out. So that's why this movie is so near and dear to me. I mean, it's one of my favorite cities in the world. Like, I can't even put into words how much I truly loved it there. And part of that reason is because of the people. The same can be said for New York. There's an electricity there and there's a feeling, but the energy of New Orleans and the spirit there is just truly unmatched. And especially because of the time period that I went, it was after Katrina, and everybody that we met, every single person was so appreciative of the tourism. And they told us, tell your friends we're not underwater, tell them to come down, tell them to visit, because tourism is so important there. And that is that spirit and sense of community that New Orleans has, regardless of your race, regardless of your economic status. And I think that the beginning of this film captures that so perfectly.
And I think that it does such a good job in, like, the pacing of this movie in the very beginning is incredible. Because, I mean, obviously you just sat through me reading the plot. I didn't think that my plot was going to take that long to read. There is so much setup in the first 10 minutes of the movie, but it doesn't drag, and it doesn't feel like it's too much at once. I love the relationship that they quickly build with Tiana and her father over that gumbo pot.
Oh, my goodness.
Everything about it. The fact that, with the neighbors and going out on the back porch and sharing food with people, and how important that is to her father and how that is passed down to her. Like, there's so much character build in so little time. It's spectacular.
You just hit the nail right on the head. I love that cooking wasn't just a hobby and something that they enjoyed doing, that they shared. It was about the bigger picture of feeding the community. And it really is such a great jumping off point for her wanting to carry the torch for opening up this restaurant. I also really, really love and appreciate that for the modern day princess story. Now, I think that things are a little bit different now, looking at it retrospectively, now that we have things like Frozen and Moana. But at the time, you're telling a princess story, and we are incorporating this idea of wishing upon a star. But they give us a but.
Yeah.
And James says, wishing is great and dream big, but hard work is what's going to take you there. And I thought that that was such an ingenious way to modernize a fairy tale.
And also ingenious that she took it and ran with it quite literally, where it becomes, it's not a part of her personality.
It's her whole personality.
It's her whole life.
Yep.
And that transition as she runs out of the room as a child when she's afraid of the frog, and then she comes back in as an adult, and she takes that 30-second power nap in between shifts, and she's got her jars in the cabinet with her tip money for the restaurant. This whole thing is awesome.
I remember at the time, too, that resonated with me so much because you and I were both working 2 and 3 jobs because, radio. And we were making minimum wage. Now, obviously, that is not the same thing. I am not comparing it to, the time period and where Tiana could get work. But I remember loving that about her character, that she was a hardworking girl, and it totally resonated with me, having to go from one job to the next and barely being able to sleep in between.
And 15 years later, for so many people, as much as things change, things seem to just stay the same. And I think that there's a personal connection. I think that Tiana, for that reason, has a universal popularity because there is a universal connection with her. So many people can connect with this character.
Well, that's the other thing too, right? I mean, we've never seen any of our princesses work. Like, yes, Cinderella cleaned, but she wasn't employed.
Right.
I'm like running through the list in my head right now. Like Ariel, Belle, even Belle didn't work because she married in technically. But it's not like she was helping Maurice with his inventions. Jasmine, no. Mulan, no. Pocahontas, no. I mean, different kind of work. She helped with the farm.
Rapunzel, no.
No. In all fairness, she was locked away.
Aurora, no. Sleeping Beauty, no.
We have never seen anybody like Tiana.
Yeah, she's the first. Let's move on now. This scene in the diner when we find out that Naveen is coming.
Yo, man, catching beignet. I love her.
Charlotte is
love her.
She's way too much, but in a way that doesn't get old.
Yeah.
From the start, like this character you should be over her by this point in time, because she is the most disconnected character that you're going to find in this film. She is the least relatable person in this movie. However, she's so brilliantly written as comic relief, as you mentioned earlier, that they never make her dislikable. She should be the most dislikable person. She should be the one that you're rooting against. She could borderline be an evil stepsister if she wasn't so well written.
And I love it's so subtle, but even in the dialogue, you know, she's got the beignets ready to go for them because they go very often. They're still very much a part of each other's lives. She calls her Tia, not Tiana. Yeah. So I love that they establish very quickly they've never missed a beat and they are still very close.
I love the introduction to Naveen because now he's arrived with Lawrence, but we don't even see Naveen right away. We see just Lawrence carrying all the bags, and then Naveen is off with his ukulele playing jazz music.
Oh my God, what a great introduction, though. In some ways, he starts to remind me of Aladdin because Aladdin wanted to just blend in. Well, really, Jasmine, because she's the one who goes out. She's the royalty that goes out in disguise. So you do get that quick hint of familiarity to a story you know, but they immediately turn it on its head. And I love how they write Naveen because he should not be so darn likable off the rip when all we know is that he's an entitled womanizer.
And he has to marry for money.
Yeah. And yet there's something so endearing about him from the jump. And then we're really going to peel back the layers and find out what's really going on with him. To your point, like him and Charlotte, you should cast off right away, and you just don't. We do also get a quick glimpse of Dr. Facilier. I love that he's got, instead of an animal sidekick, his shadow is his sidekick. But I really love that before we get to the supernatural with him, they ground him in reality as a person and a member of this community because he's eating at the restaurant, same as Charlotte. So I really like that they start to sprinkle him in this way. Before we get to the voodoo, though, it is my one teeny tiny little critique of this film because I am left with a question. We see that Tiana is going to get her restaurant and her mom shows up with her dad's gumbo pot as a gift to celebrate. I see that Eudora is wearing a wedding band. I don't know if she's still wearing it out of respect for her late husband or if she is at this point remarried because we know that Tiana is living in the family home. We don't see Eudora there. So my question is, where is she living? Is she remarried? Am I reading too much into this? Yes, absolutely. Yep. But I kind of want to know like where the thread is as far as their relationship. Is she also taking care of her mother? Is her mother still working? Like that's just, you know, it kind of fired off a million questions. None of them that make or break the story, but I just want to know.
So go read a book. This is an overreach. I assume that she and her mother are living in the house together.
But we don't see that. We need that beat. We need the beat of Tiana flying in the house trying to catch a power nap like, hey, Mom, talk to you later.
No, you don't. You absolutely do not.
But then why didn't she give her the gumbo pot at home? See, that's the weird thing I'm bumping on is the gumbo pot. Wouldn't the gumbo pot have been in the house already? Why is it a gift?
Because it was her father's. It's passing down a family heirloom to be used in the restaurant that she and her father dreamed to open. So where better to give it to her than the restaurant that she has just seemingly purchased?
Right, but it's not a tiny pot, and that house does not have a ton of storage. So why wrap it up in a bow and drag this big thing over to the restaurant when you could have just as easily done it in the home if you're both still living there?
I'm moving on. I can't be a part of this conversation anymore.
You know what? I think you are not the only one moving on. I think Eudora moved on as well, and I think that she remarried.
All right, goodbye. So what they do really well here, I think, is they give her the false sense of security that she's going to close. And the realtors have said to her, oh, we'll do it after Mardi Gras. And she's like, nope, we'll just do it tonight. Which contracts don't get drawn up that fast. But, if I wanted to hang myself on something and get caught on something, I could get caught on that. But I'm not going to. I like, though, that they use this masquerade ball as a setting for so many things to happen. I love that in the interim, we have Dr. Facilier entering into a deal with both Lawrence and Naveen. I love that he never says to Naveen anything more than "you're going to be green." He's like,
yeah.
And when you hear "you're going to be green," you're either green with money or green with envy. And Naveen is just obsessed with the idea of money. He hears green. Okay, I'm good. Lawrence is tired of getting pushed around. We're going to give you power. That whole thing, that whole setup is great.
Lawrence adds such an added layer to how they flipped this fairy tale that we know and kept us guessing with it. That was such a great choice. It's a great subplot. It's awesome.
I love that they use the masquerade ball as a means of introducing Lawrence in Naveen form.
Yes.
I love that it introduces Naveen in frog form. I love that you also have this moment where Tiana learns that she has been outbid on the property when she thinks that she's going to a contract signing. Like, the build-up to forcing her to the Evening Star, falling through the table, being covered in powdered sugar, having to be dressed in one of Charlotte's dresses, being mistaken for a princess. Everything that happens here is so tactical and it's so smart.
I was going to say that exact thing. I love this moment for Charlotte because even though she's got tunnel vision of I'm going to marry a prince, she didn't get mad that the man catching beignets were ruined. She didn't blame Tiana for any of it. She literally picks her up, dusts her off, and here, you're my best friend. You can have one of my dresses. It's just such a beautiful moment for the two of them.
And even better, Naveen is so out of touch with reality that he doesn't understand what a masquerade ball is.
I also love this moment for him where, I said it before, we should not be able to stand him at this point because he should be coming off as entitled, but he's so charming. This confidence doesn't come off as cockiness as he's trying to persuade Tiana for a kiss. He knows he's a frog. But he still thinks he's got it.
Covered in mucus and all. He doesn't change. Like, it's hysterical that he doesn't change.
No, and what I like the way that they've built him up to this point is that once he becomes a frog, it's not this woe is me moment because, a weaker character, this is going to make them curl up in a corner and, oh, what am I going to do? I love that wasn't the pitch to Tiana. Like this, you're my only ticket out. What am I going to do?
He could be Cusco and he's not.
Yes, and totally exploit her kindness by playing to the part of her that's going to feel sorry for him. And nope, not at all. He just comes out swinging of kiss me and then this is all over. And then they flip the story again.
Him not understanding that she is not a princess, the fact that she is now cursed because she is not a princess having kissed the frog, all of this is just working. The chaos that ensues at the party with Stella the dog chasing them away. forcing their escape into the bayou, all of this works so well.
And then what I love too is once we're in the bayou, everything serves to push this story forward. They're being chased by new predators because they're adjusting to being frogs. They don't know what to do. They don't realize, especially Naveen coming from royalty. He's never had an enemy. So they're completely out of their element. They're fighting for their survival. And yet they do still manage to have the conversation of playing the blame game. And that's part of the great thing about their dynamic too, is that they're total opposites. This isn't just a case of opposites attract. It's sort of a case of enemies to lovers. So they do get that, they get into that bickering match. But instead of, leaning into a comedic moment of having them like sitting on lily pads or something like that, having this argument and being very dialogue heavy, they're doing it as they're being chased. It's just so brilliant.
When we do get into the bayou and we're evading predators, we meet Louis.
God, what a good intro.
Great introduction. I love that he's an alligator that wants to play a trumpet. By the way, I love that when, and it's so overlooked, that Tiana in frog form, when she says, Stella, stop, it's Tiana, and Stella looks up and goes, Tiana? The fact that now that she's an animal, she can speak with other animals. My only question is, after she's a human, can she still speak and understand Louis? But I'm willing to overlook that.
That's a good question.
I'll send you spiraling on that for a little while. But I love his introduction. I love that they take an animal that is native to the bayou, that's well known for the bayou. They give his motivation to be a jazz musician, something that's incredibly huge in New Orleans. The fact that he's so lovable and so innocent, but because he is what he is, he scares people away. It gives his character such a great motivation.
Yeah, I would say Louis probably has to be definitely top 10, maybe even top 5 all-time character introductions, because it's just so strong and they set up who he is right away. I love this complex of he has no idea that his size and his menacing quality, just by being who he is, scares people, which, is also a pretty great message that they're distilling through this character. But I love that his goal is just to play music, and he wants to be human just as bad as Tiana and Naveen do. So they've all got the same motivation, but for completely different reasons. And it's such a great way to kick off their journey together. I also love the bonding moment right away between Louis and Naveen, because they recognize what the other one is playing, and it's oh, you know jazz? I know jazz. And immediately it's just like, okay, he's a good guy. We're off.
I also love that you do get a little bit of recycled animation here. I noticed 2 bits of recycled animation, and I'm sure that if I looked harder, I'd find more.
I had a couple too, yeah.
So this is what I think, like we talked about Wish recently, and how things were very subtle at first, and I loved catching on them myself, but by the end of the movie, they were way too obvious, and they were trying to be like, oh, by the way, this is what this meant. I think the first piece of recycled animation I get is when Louis is talking about Mama Odie, and he pulls the Spanish moss back to show her hair. I'm pretty sure that that's Mad Madam Mim from Sword in the Stone. I think that's Mim reanimation.
Oh, nice catch. I didn't catch that one. I had a couple, but I'll save them for when we talk about the music, because that's where I caught most of them.
Yeah, I caught one that's very, very obvious. I also love the fact that even though she's going to get him what he wants, in theory, he's still afraid of Mama Odie, to the point where he's intentionally leading them down the wrong path. And they can't say that he's not helping them, because should they run into her, it's just a happy accident.
But what's so funny, I love the juxtaposition of Mama Odie, who is just this woman living by herself in the woods who's not really practicing magic. She's just outcast, you know, the way that the Salem witch trials took something that a woman did and pointed the finger at her for being a witch. That's sort of what's happened to Mama Odie here, but she's not practicing anything supernatural. Yet Dr. Facilier is. And I love that now that we're starting to see the spells and his friends from the other side come out, he was sinister enough on his own before he employed the supernatural. So once you unleash that on the Bayou too, I love how they built to it.
And it's the perfect spot to unleash the chaos, unleash the friends from the other side into the Bayou, because what happens next is the botched proposal between Lawrence and Charlotte. And it's the first time that we see that this magic can actually wear off, which I thought was an interesting twist. I thought that as long as they had the talisman on, they were good. But I guess, like the talisman, like the blood in the talisman acts as a fuel, which was not very clear at first. It seems like the more you use it, the magic that is, the more it drains the blood. So this is where you start to see a very on-brand, awkward proposal where Lawrence, not only is he stumbling through it, but it's the most on brand for Charlotte because she's just got tunnel vision. I'm about to marry my prince, that she's not even paying attention to everything that's happening around her because she's already thinking about her Mardi Gras wedding. And off she goes. The scene is great for everybody involved and adds a layer. And I remember from when we saw the movie for the first time, it adds a layer that I didn't see coming with this draining of the fuel, so to speak.
Yeah, you know, that wasn't something that I really picked up on. I mean, yes, I knew the magic was wearing off and I knew that it had to do with the blood draining, but when you really consider that, it gives this movie so much of a darker quality that I think that you need because you are talking about voodoo and hoodoo and bringing all of those elements in. But I really didn't make that connection to how deep they actually took it because now Facilier is quite literally out for blood.
Yeah. So back in the Bayou, you talked earlier about how Lewis's intro is an all-timer. I think Ray's intro is almost better than Lewis's.
It's so good.
I love everything about it. I love the musical number that he launches into. We're going to talk about the music in a few moments here. But he's so much fun. He's so lovable. He's so endearing. And not to jump ahead too far, but it makes what happens later even worse. And it really strikes a chord. I sometimes think, and I'm kind of hoping that with the opening of this attraction and a lot more eyes being on this film more recently than maybe in the last few years, because obviously with opening the attraction, it's going to draw a lot of interest. I'm sure that Disney is seeing a bump in streams on Disney+. I hope that this character sort of gets his day in the spotlight because I think that Ray is often forgotten about.
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but lest we forget, this attraction takes place after she opens her restaurant. It takes place after this film. So as much as I would love to see a wink and a nod to the character, I don't think that we're going to get it much more than a star, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I'm talking more big picture, people going back and watching the movie.
Oh, for sure.
But let's move on though into what at the time I remember thinking, and honestly, it wasn't until the second time we watched the movie this week, a scene that kind of seems silly, but ends up having a lot more layers to it. The scene where you get these podunk hunters that are out trying to hunt frogs so that they can have frogs' legs for dinner. It's funny, it's zany, it's wacky, it's there for kids. 6-year-olds are going to laugh at this, okay? But it actually, the scene means a lot more to the movie, and even I didn't pick that up the first 2 times around.
Well, this is one of those things like I was talking about earlier where they're trying to escape the gators, but they're having an argument and bickering while it's happening. The same thing sort of happens here because they're putting a lot of character work into what is otherwise, a tense scene because they're being chased, but at the same time, it's comic relief because there's something for the kids to latch onto. And I feel like, to your point with this strong introduction from Ray, I feel like that's the takeaway from this part of the film. Everybody remembers Ray, but what you don't realize is that, Naveen and Tiana, before the hillbillies come, are arguing again. And one of the things that we love about Tiana's character is that she's such a hard worker. It's a point of pride with her, and he totally just levels her about it and calls her out and basically says that she's all work and no play. And that's why, they're going to work out so great as a couple, because he's going to teach her to stop and smell the roses, which is Naveen's whole thing. And like we were saying earlier, if he was written in a different way, this stop and smell the roses quality about him could come off as laziness, but it doesn't. He's just trying to get her to slow down and take life in. And that is what balances them so well. But we're not quite there yet, because now it's still a bickering match, and she totally throws it back in his face and says that he was raised sucking on a silver spoon. And then the chase ensues. But this is a really important moment in their relationship, because they're not going to bail on each other. They're not going to leave the other one captured. And it shows now what a great team they actually do make when they work together. And the whole thing is just so brilliant too, because it's a play on frog legs are a delicacy. So
depending on who you are.
Depending on where you're at. But in New Orleans they are. So this isn't a completely unmotivated chase either, just to get them, further down the bayou.
Right. But it shows them working together to escape. It's around the same time that we get this gumbo scene where she's teaching him how to mince mushrooms. You're starting to see the relationship develop. In other films, it happens in rom-coms all the time. It's something stupid. They adjust somebody's pocket square, and they catch him in the moonlight the right way. And it's like, oh, maybe there's something here.
Or they trip and fall.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you could have done something. I mean, they're frogs. It's not a pocket square, but you understand what I'm saying. They could have done something very, very meaningless, and it's just supposed to be, you get it. Like, they actually made substance here that made sense and drove the story forward. It's a very, very important scene.
And I'm glad that you bring up the Bayou Gumbo too, because we're bringing it back to food, and the theme of food bringing a community together. But in this instance, it's really important for Tiana's character too, because it's not just her default setting. It's how she shows love. So the fact that she is cooking for Naveen and her newfound friends, it's a cue to how she's feeling towards him now.
After all of this happens, we get a great introduction to Mama Odie, and it's a phenomenal fake out because we see the shadow. We assume these are the friends from the other side that are coming to capture Naveen. And instead, it's just crazy Mama Odie. And in all of the right ways, because Lewis has been afraid of her the entire time. Ray is not. Ray, the way he speaks of her would lead you to believe that they have a personal relationship, as it turns out they do. But because you don't really know how tweaked Ray is, quite honestly, you're not sure if you can believe that she's harmless or not. And she kind of just ends up being this crazy old lady, but the kind that you love. She's a phenomenal character. She is so much fun.
I'd hardly call her crazy. I think she is so very in control of everything that she's doing. I worry about Mama Odie. She's living out here all by herself. They say that she's over 100, right?
Yeah.
And she's blind. Although I don't know about that. That would be such a great, like craft of acting sort of a thing. If that's the quality that they wanted to give her, where she's saying she's blind, but she's actually not. And that's sort of like a veil that she's hiding behind. That would actually be really fun. But she is in fact blind. And much like my questions for you, Dora, this is something that I'm way overthinking because I just worry about her being out there all by her lonesome in the woods. And, you know, she's, again, using practical magic. She doesn't have friends on the other side helping her out. So I get very concerned with her survival.
This is... All right.
Why do we do this podcast? It's because we care about these characters.
No, this has become neuroses. One of the best lines in the movie, by the way, is delivered, and it's kind of buried in here, where Mama Odie, and again, this is how we know that she and Ray go back a while. I believe I don't think it's his mother. I think she says, "How's your grandmother doing?" And he goes, "Well, she got in trouble for flashing the neighbors again." The firefly, like, so good. Like, the joke just lands.
No, especially because we have seen the grandma.
Yes.
It wouldn't have landed so hard if they had not given us the visual of this little firefly with her walker. It's hysterical, and I love that they just keep the joke running. Obviously, we're going to talk about the music in a few moments here, but I do want to bring this up now because there is something so important that's happening thematically, and this is one of the most brilliant choices that I think the filmmakers made as far as making a contemporary fairy tale. And that is the introduction of this idea of what you want versus what you need. Because up until this point, all of these princesses that we've fallen in love with and that we're rooting for on their journeys, they're going after what they want. And, you know, when we talked about all of the Renaissance films, those were sort of the quote unquote modern day princesses of their time. And one of the ways that they modernized them was that they wanted more than just a prince. The prince was a bonus of them pursuing their actual goal. And here it really starts to toy with the idea of, is she going to get her prince in the end? Because it's not what she wanted from the jump. It's not really what she needs. But you're so invested in the relationship at this point because it's so strong. Somehow Disney managed to make us second guess if the prince and the princess are actually going to end up together. And it's just so brilliantly done from here to the end of the film.
That's really well done, as is the scene where we get onto the riverboat. Louis having people believe that he is a human in an alligator costume so that he can go and perform with the band.
It's so good.
So good. And this moment between Ray and Naveen, where Naveen makes, out of things that he can find on the boat, he makes an engagement ring for Tiana, and Ray believes, as he's practicing his speech, that he's proposing to Evangeline. Everything that leads to what ends up being this botched proposal is absolutely spectacular.
It really is. I love that this is the second botched proposal that we have in this film. Again, breaking the fairy tale mold. But to your point, yeah, I love this scene. It's a great comedic beat, but it's also a really good beat between Naveen and Ray. And I'm glad that they played it out this way because there was a moment where Naveen was just going to be practicing the proposal. And I think Ray caught him. And instead they chose to have him talk to Evangeline. And I love now that, you know, one of the most endearing things about Ray is his devotion to Angeline, even though everybody else is sort of naysaying him. But now you've got Naveen, who's fallen in love. He believes in love, so he believes in Evangeline. And I'm glad that they gave it this moment as opposed to having Louis walk in on Naveen practicing and being like, oh my God, you love Tiana. You know, like it feels bigger. And they didn't, even though it's a moment of comedic relief, they didn't make a joke out of it.
I love the moment where Naveen gets kidnapped by the shadow people, when Ray spills the beans to Tiana as to what's going to happen. and they get to the Mardi Gras parade, and they see, quote-unquote, Naveen. And Tiana immediately is ready to give up. She thinks that she's been swindled, and Ray is the one telling her, but you didn't turn back to a human yet. Something else has to be missing here. The only thing I take issue with is that for as smart and caring and sensitive and sensible as Tiana is, there's something that just has never sat right with me in the 3 viewings of this film that I've had in total. Well, probably more like 4, but that's beyond the point. There's something that's always just kind of left a sour taste in my mouth, that she ultimately, out of frustration, lashes out at Ray and just says, Evangeline's not real, she's just a star. I understand that it ultimately, it's a plot device so that Ray is motivated to break Naveen out and set everything right. But there's just something irrational out of this very rational character that, to me, seems like a bit of a step backwards for the character.
I'm actually going to disagree on that, because I think this is a case of hurt people hurt people.
That's fair. And I have no response to that. It's fair.
But as far as everything else going on, I mean, this is just, again, brilliant use of setting to bring everything to a culmination in the Mardi Gras parade. I mean, we've obviously heard about it from Charlotte. I want my Mardi Gras wedding. But because we know that Charlotte is eventually going to get duped and she's not going to get the prince, you kind of forget about Mardi Gras. You don't actually think that you're going to get to see it because you know the wedding's not really going to happen. So I love that they managed to bring the A and the B plot together here to have everything culminate. And this is where having that added layer of Lawrence as a stand-in for Naveen the entire time is just so brilliant. Because you obviously needed somebody to play the part to be tricking Charlotte, but now, you know, they'll one-up it again because Tiana sees the wrong thing at the wrong time. And they're not only leaning into the setting of New Orleans with Mardi Gras, I love that they bring it into the graveyard because that is such a big part of the culture. It's not just about the ghost tours. It's not just about the voodoo. Really, New Orleans, it's about celebrating life. And part of the way that they do that is to acknowledge the other side and have that so prevalent. So I love that everything is culminating in the graveyard here.
And it sets up the most literal and figurative crushing moment in the movie. I honestly forgot that this happens to Ray.
How? Of all the things that I remember from this movie, or from the first time that we watched it, probably the music was a standout. Obviously, the setting is a standout. But this was the biggest thing that I remembered from this story, is losing Ray. But you can keep living in your world where we're going to see him on the ride.
Just to be clear, you're concerning yourself with, did her mother remarry? Who's watching her? Where's this? And because I forgot that Ray got crushed, and I'm assuming that, you know, you'll see him in the ride, and by the way, you will, because plush toys make money for the company. So yeah, you're going to see him. He'll be a flashlight. He's going to be something. I can guarantee you it.
I'm surprised he's not a popcorn bucket. Ooh, that's a miss, Disney.
Yet. See, if we've learned anything with Disney, specifically with Marvel, you can bring any character back you want as long as they make merchandise money. Ray's a moneymaker. Bank on it. Ha! Pun intended.
He's more of a moneymaker than Star that they hung their hat on with Wish.
Which is a shame, but you already know our
You can
feelings
still buy
on
a
Wish.
Star if you want one.
What was so... and I had this feeling again when I sat to watch it this week. That moment of when Ray gets crushed, you have that feeling of like, oh, but it's a Disney movie. He's not dead. He's just badly hurt, and he'll make a miraculous recovery. You know, the Beast shouldn't be alive. Certainly Ray's coming back. No. It was brilliant. Like, I hate to say it because I love the character. Killing him off in such a brutal fashion was absolutely necessary.
Well, no, and brutal is the exact word because they don't cut away from it.
Well, I mean, they don't show it, but you hear it.
No. I'm not talking about the actual crush. I'm talking about when Louis brings him back to Tiana and Naveen in his final moments, and they tell him, we're going to stay this way. You were right. Something else. We need another piece. We're missing something. So we're going to stay frogs together because Charlotte has tried kissing Naveen. Nothing has worked, even though she made it before midnight. I'm talking about the actual fade out, the literal fade out on Ray.
Yeah.
They don't cut to the reaction, which they normally would at this point. Like with Belle and Beast, you see her crying.
Right.
With Bambi's mother, you see the reaction.
Yeah.
You know, they actually hold on the character that goes out, which was kind of a surprise. But again, you know, what I applaud this film for, it is a modern day fairy tale. They took this places that they had never gone before.
Correct. I do want to take a couple of steps backwards, though, just for a moment. I want to talk about the moment between Facilier and Tiana, because when Facilier steps on Ray, I think that elevates him to a new level of Disney villain, but I think it puts him over the top when he has this conversation with Tiana, shows her a version of the world that she wants, where you're going to get your restaurant and you're going to have Naveen, and isn't this what your father wanted? He was such a hardworking man. Life really isn't fair. Like, he's so convincing. There's a part of me sitting there going, Tiana, you should just take this deal. And everybody walks away happy, even though, you know, ultimately that's not what's going to happen. But he's so convincing. He's so good. Like, he is one of the best Disney villains of all time. I think he's a perfect fit in Not So Scary. Frankly, I don't know that you could expand on him too much more outside of Not So Scary. Not because he's not great. I just think that his personality fits that party so well. But on the other hand, if you found a way to incorporate him into more in the parks, like, I don't want to see him on a parade, like, waving at people. He's not, he's not eccentric like Captain Hook, you know?
Yeah.
Like, or the Queen of Hearts. But he is one of the most underrated villains of all time.
What I love too, and, you know, I don't want to get too much into it because we are going to talk about the music and the sequence of Almost There. It's hyper stylized, but when he shows her the dream sequence, now we get to see her as this version of herself, like the actual character. We get to see her step into that reality. So I love the juxtaposition of when it's her dream at the beginning, it's a dream sequence because it is so hyper stylized. And now we see it within her reach. And this is another one of those moments that plays into the idea of, is the princess going to get her prince? Because she's got nothing to lose at this point. She just had her heart broken. She thinks Naveen is going to marry Charlotte. It's like, why wouldn't you take it?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's going to come with a cost, and that's what's stopping you. But there is real temptation here. And then as far as how Dr. Facilier goes out, that's pretty dark too. I mean, it's not as bad as like Gaston's demise or something where you actually see a villain die. I mean, he is for all intents and purposes dying, but because of the dark arts involved, I think you could make the argument that, like, if they did do a sequel, or I think they are going to do the Disney Plus series, we'll see him again because he's not really gone. I'm sure that there's going to be a way to bring his soul back, or he'll make a deal where he can walk the earth again. This is not the end of Dr. Facilier, but we've not seen fear in a villain quite like this. Really not since Gaston, because he's falling. You know that now Dr. Facilier is going to have to answer for his crimes. So I love that they lock in on that terror in his face. And now it's going to be there set in stone forever.
Pick one. Ray or Yondu. Which funeral is worse?
Oh, come on.
Pick one. I mean, the answer is clearly Yondu. This one is just a very close second.
Well, is it though? I think a lot of Yondu, I mean, obviously it's a character we love, but we love Ray too. I think a lot of the emotion from that scene comes from the music and from Rocket's gesture of getting him back in the favor of the Ravagers. In some ways, this is worse when you're going to call me out on this. Because his grandma has to bury him. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's you, the places you go.
But no, when you think about it, Yondu, that was chosen family burying him. And it's really, or, you know, it's a Viking funeral. That was chosen family. Here, a grandmother shouldn't have to bury her grandchild. A parent should not have to bury their child. And that's immediately where I go. So on a technicality, yeah, Ray's worse.
And it's very New Orleans because as sad as they are, they immediately start to celebrate. And part of that is because the star appears with Evangeline. So everybody believes, oh, he wasn't crazy the whole time. There he is. Now let me ask you this. I have another question for you. Because this was obviously a return to hand-drawn animation. This was a big deal. I believe was this was the 50th Disney animated film?
Yes, I think that was the driving force behind why they did this, not just the return to hand-drawn and not just for the sake of not going out with Home on the Range. It's because this was the 50th and they wanted to round it out with a hand-drawn.
So we've talked about recycled animation in this film. Is Ray the second star to the right? Or is Evangeline the second star to the right? Because now you've got two stars. Is this a subtle tip to Peter Pan? You know, the things that they started doing in Wish and then, as I mentioned earlier, kind of just gave it all away. Is this a tie-in? Is it meant to be a tribute? I think it is.
I believe so. I think it's a tribute, but actually I thought the star at first was Pinocchio. I thought this was Geppetto's wish, or Geppetto's wishing star, I should say. But that could have also been recycled in Peter Pan to make the second star to the right. We know they were recycling animation back then, so it's very possible. You know, and think about the time period. You know, this was a risky move. Obviously, they wanted to round it out at 50 animated films. But at the time, part of the reason that hand-drawn animation, they were making the shift to computers is budget. So being that they were taking this on, of course they're going to try and cut corners wherever they can. So I'm sure this is recycled animation. But because of the way that they're utilizing it, it does feel more like a hat tip than a ripoff to save a buck.
But it leads to our happy ending. They have their Bayou wedding as frogs. I love that technically now she is the Princess of Maldonia, so by kissing her, they return to human form. I love that they're still kicking it with Lewis.
Yeah.
And that he intimidates the realtors into selling her the property, and they do get their happy ending. Like, in all, like, the ending is so funny. And then Charlotte apparently is still going to get her prince. She just has to wait another 12 years. The 6-year-old brother thing is fantastic.
I love it. I love that she's still got tunnel vision. Honestly, this story is so good and it's so airtight. I feel like it would have been just as much of a happy ending had you left them as frogs, because that's the message, right? The what you want versus what you need. However, I think it would have been a disservice to Tiana because she had to learn to love. She had to learn to enjoy life outside of work and realize that there is more than your dream. So for the love story, it would have worked to leave them as frogs because there's still that lesson there. But you have to see her open the restaurant.
Yeah.
Like, it has to carry through at this point. And what I truly love more than anything else is that, yes, they're back in human form. I think we can assume that Naveen is no longer shunned because he found a wife, but regardless, he's ready to roll up his sleeves and help her and continue. I mean, he was willing to give up everything and put her first so that her dream came true. And now that he's got what he wanted, he's not just sitting back on it. He's still going to help her step by step achieve this dream. So I love that we end with him helping her work on this restaurant.
And I love that he and Lewis playing in the band, another subtle hat tip to those classic Disney animators, the Firefly 5. We all know that that's a tribute to the Firehouse 5. I love that they put that in here.
It's so brilliant. And it's still a nod back to Ray.
Are we ready to talk about our cast?
Absolutely.
Annika Nani Rose plays Tiana. She's absolutely phenomenal. You know, we're going to talk about music in a little bit here, but the way that she sings these songs, the amount of heart she puts into, like, she puts so much heart into this whole thing. It's her vocal performance musically, but also the vocal performance in terms of being an actress. She gives so much depth to this character that I don't think you could have just cast anybody in this role. I think she was absolutely perfect. I think she embodied everything that Tiana is.
I couldn't agree more. I absolutely love this character, not only for what she represents for inclusivity, but because she is the perfect modern day princess, and they really figured out a way to make her more contemporary. Even though this film is set back in the 20s, they really made her the perfect fit for a new generation of telling this princess fairy tale. And all of that is just completely elevated by Annika Noni Rose's performance. I love her speaking voice. She doesn't quite have a southern drawl, but I just love the smooth tone of it. And her singing is just 10 out of 10. She's outstanding.
Bruno Campos plays Prince Naveen, and it takes a very special kind of talent, I think, to take a character like Naveen, who, like, in theory should be so incredibly dislikable, but he's never not endearing as all hell. He's a ton of fun. The comedic timing is outstanding, and I think that that's a complete credit to the actor involved.
The character toes the line so perfectly of having confidence, but not cockiness. It's just such a perfect balance, and I love that they didn't go too over the top with it, especially because he really is playing up that accent in frog form, and it doesn't become too much of a caricature.
For sure. David Keith plays, Keith David. I was reading the back of his index card. Keith David, he plays Dr. Facilier. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I think Facilier's amazing. I think he's wonderfully drawn. Like, I just love the animation. I love how he moves. I love his attitude. I love the song. Like, everything about him is just spectacular.
Yeah, we haven't talked nearly enough about Dr. Facilier's aesthetic, because I love the animation here. I love the stylistic choices that they made for his outfit. I love the top hat. I love the necklaces. To me, he kind of looks in the eyes a little bit like Little Richard, with, you know, that like almost like it looks like eyeliner, but it's not, because he's just got like really heavy set eyes. And until you said it now about the animation, I didn't realize how reminiscent he is of Peter Pan and his shadow, because the shadow does come to life. The shadow is a character unto itself. So he doesn't quite move like Peter Pan, because obviously Peter Pan's got more of a bounce and he's got more of like a stealth to him. Almost, I would say, if anything, I'd compare him to like Yzma.
Yeah.
Because he's so angular, but I just love how they animated him, and the voice performance just puts it way over the top.
Michael Leon Woolley plays Lewis. Louis is great. He's so much fun. He's great comic relief where you need comic relief. He has so much heart that he puts into this film. I'm not going to say he's the heart of the film because I'm saving that for someone else. But I really, really love Louis. I think he's awesome.
Louis is such a fun character, and admittedly, there is so much more to him than I initially realized. He might be one of the best Disney characters of all time. Starting off with being animated by Eric Goldberg, who did the genie. So he does have that larger than life quality just in the way that he's animated because of who's behind him. I just love the complex that he's got, that he wants to be a human. In that way, he's sort of like King Louie and Baloo all rolled into one, where King Louie wants to be like you and Baloo kind of has it down because he's just so easygoing and go with the flow, and you know, he gets the simple pleasures in life. And I love how, you know, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I love that you can see those characters emulated into Louis. But more than anything else, I think it speaks to the greater message that he does not care about the skin he's in. He has a dream that he wants to pursue. And what better way to have the film reflected in that character?
Now, I think the character that is really the heart of the film is Ray.
Hands down.
Jim Cummings, one of his best performances. For all of the legendary performances that he has given us, it's got to be top 3. Minimum, it's got to be top 3.
The Southern drawl is so impressive. And there are little notes, I don't think where he slips, but like you can sort of hear other characters or other voices that he's done bleeding through. Like not Winnie the Pooh, but maybe like a Darkwing Duck. And you know, there were some of those moments that I caught, but it's not a knock at the performance. It's just because he is so familiar. But I certainly agree. This has got to be top 3.
Let's talk about Peter Bartlett, who plays Lawrence. Everything about Lawrence I love. He is just straight comic relief, but the character, there's so much depth to the character. There's a certain darkness to the character that they don't really get to address because you don't get to spend enough time with him. Like if there's anything, I wish that we would have gotten a little bit more time with him. But I love it. I love his motivation. I love how he works with Facilier. I love how he turns on Naveen.
What's so funny to me about Lawrence is that he looks like Cogsworth in human form more than Cogsworth actually does in Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
But I love what this character does and the added layer that he gives to the story. And the comic relief is just so great. And it's a subtle performance, but it's really great.
Jennifer Cody plays Charlotte, and this character, I said earlier, should be too much. You should be over it awfully fast, and you're not. For such a selfish character, innocently selfish, she's also very selfless. And I think that comes out in her interactions with Tiana. I think that this is, at times and often, forgotten about character unjustly. I think she's great.
No, I feel like so many people talk about Charlotte in the canon. I think especially because, well, maybe it's more of a Disneyland thing because of the beignets.
Maybe.
And there's just more opportunity to quote her. But I love her. Again, similar to Lawrence, I love what she does for story. I love the way that she sort of grounds the film in her relationship with Tiana. To me, her arc is very similar to Glinda in Wicked. And to your point, that's where, you know, you shouldn't like her, but she's so endearing and she's got such a big heart and she cares so much. She totally wins you over. Or not in this case. Glinda wins you over in Wicked. In this case, she's got you from the beginning. And where you're expecting her to fail, she never does.
John Goodman plays Eli, Charlotte's father. Put John Goodman in anything, I'll sign up for it. He's great in everything, so he's great in this.
The voice is uncanny. You know it's him as soon as he comes onto the screen, but it's a pleasant surprise nonetheless. I had forgotten that he was in this, but even though it's a small part, I love him in it. I think he suits the character perfectly. You know, the character sort of looks like him.
Yeah.
He's got that large, commanding performance, which is truly ironic with this character because he is totally at Charlotte's mercy.
All of the time. Now here's a puppy. Jennifer Lewis plays Mama Odie. I love Mama Odie. She gives that great line of what you want versus what you need, but at the same time, you don't know if you can take her seriously because she just seems crazy and unhinged. Not dangerous, but she just seems out of her mind.
She's very much like Rafiki, towing that line between the wise sage and the cast out, really. But I mean, she's 10 out of 10. No notes.
Oprah Winfrey plays Eudora. I think she's really good. I mean, I can't speak to her acting chops because I haven't seen her in an awful lot, but I thought she was really good here. It's not a huge role, but she puts a lot of heart behind it. So yeah, good on you, Oprah. Good job.
Well, like I said, I have questions, but that's not a knock at the performance. I just wish they would have landed this character. Although I will say at the end of the film, when Tiana opens the restaurant, she is sitting at a table with the in-laws, with Naveen's parents, and it's just her. So I guess I do get my answer of no, she is not remarried. But regardless, I mean, yeah, it's a small part, but of course, it's Oprah. You know, she does a great job with it. Unfortunately, I just don't think that you needed more of Eudora in this because the whole thing is about Tiana wanting to carry out her father's dream. And it's certainly not, I mean, they could have taken it this route where Eudora was sort of standing in her way. She's not. She's being totally supportive. But they could have perhaps leaned into it a little bit more as far as her saying, you know, there is that line where she's like, your father died chasing that dream or something to that effect. And I feel like they might have been able to play with that a little bit more.
Terrence Howard plays James, Tiana's father. Another very small role, but an exceptional talent. I love Terrence Howard. I thought he was very good in this for the very little screen time that his character had.
He knocked it out of the park because he gives James such a presence that is felt throughout the rest of the film.
Are we ready to talk about the soundtrack?
Oh, I've been ready. We have to say it. I mean, Randy Newman just slays here.
Absolutely. Down in New Orleans is the first song on the soundtrack. I think that it's a perfect fit for the film. I think it has a perfect feel for the city. And I love Dr. John. I think that he performs it wonderfully.
I love this song as an opening number. I think it's such a great way to lean into the setting and to the culture. And it just really captures that spirit. There is a piece of, well, I wouldn't say that this is recycled animation. It's more of an Easter egg. As they're coming in, it's a really wide shot and they're sort of settling into the town. Somebody's leaning over their balcony, cleaning the magic carpet.
Nice catch. Almost there. This is an instant classic. It was when the movie came out. As soon as you heard it, the first time you knew that this was going to be a Disney mainstay. I love the concept art animation that they have here inside of the restaurant. It's a perfect amalgamation of really what the entire film is.
It's also the perfect I Want song. And again, this is where they are breaking the mold of the traditional princess fairy tale. Because when you think about all of the other I Want songs like Ariel or Belle or Mulan, they're all sort of, standing or swimming in one case. But, it's just sort of them in their natural state. And I just love how they did this as a dream sequence. I love stylistically what it does. I love that it sort of looks like Mary Blair's art a little bit. I mean, the colors are a lot more vibrant than Mary Blair's because she used more pastels, and this yellow is like really bright. But I feel like the drawing is sort of close. And I'm wondering if they did that intentionally because it was the 50th film and they wanted to, sort of nod back to their roots there. But I just love this whole sequence. What I also love about this choice is not only do they call back to it later on when Dr. Facilier shows her what life could be like, I think it was just such a smart choice to do it this way because she's in the restaurant with Eudora. She just bought it. So what do you do with this? It would have been a cleaning montage otherwise. And we just saw her work so hard. We saw her pull the double shift on no sleep. We don't need her to do the Snow White or the Cinderella here. So I think it was just also a really clever way to get themselves out of it. Here's where I caught my piece of recycled animation. As she's trying to pitch Eudora on, her vision of what this is going to be, she's standing behind her and she's got her hands on her shoulders. That is Belle convincing Maurice to fix the invention and go to the fair.
I never would have caught that.
You know what it is? In some ways, the recycled animation is really hard to catch. And in others, like in that instance, the only reason I caught it is because I've seen Beauty and the Beast 1,000 times. And I just recognize the motion. I mean, I can't tell you 100% if that's what they did, but I'd say like I'm 75% sure, but I definitely recognized the movement.
Friends on the Other Side, what an underappreciated villain song. I love the performance here. I love the lyrics. It's the green that I see.
Green is the future.
Yeah, all of it. Spectacular.
Yeah, this whole sequence is great. I love that Dr. Facilier gleaned all of the information on Naveen for himself just by, hiding out and eavesdropping on conversations. And now he's totally using that against them. And I just love the song and the animation. I love how, this is where they could have fun with the darker elements and they can lean into the voodoo a little bit more without making it scary. And, it's kind of lighthearted because they leaned into this really vibrant color palette, even though they are playing with the shadows because he's a shadow man. Those you got the villain green and you've got the purples, and even though it should feel really dark and kind of scary, it's got that like haunted mansion quality where it's sort of a spooky fun. And I love how they lean into the voodoo elements with the shrunken heads coming to life. And, I thought that was a really fun way to give him sort of a sidekick other than his shadow.
When We're Human, this is just a fun song. Like, I love it for everyone, meaning Tiana, Lewis, and Naveen. I'm not going to call it a filler song. It is probably the weakest song on the soundtrack, but I say that because it's a lack of better term. It's not a poor song. It's just, of all of them, it is the one that feels the most like filler, but that doesn't mean that it isn't a ton of fun.
Yeah, I mean, in comparison, it's not the most memorable song, but I love what it's doing for the characters here, because they all have the same goal of being human. They just have different motivations.
Gonna take you there. Jim Cummings just slays. There's not much else I can say. It's one of the most memorable songs out of the movie. It's such a fun romp.
And it's so impressive because, knowing that the film is set in New Orleans, you're going to get jazz, that you're going to get blues, but he even managed to do Zydeco and make it sound like the rest of the body of work in the film. It's so impressive. And we didn't mention, I know I mentioned Randy Newman at the top, but his mother's side of the family was from New Orleans. So that's why he's able to do this so well, because he's just been influenced by this music and he's grown up with it. This whole sequence, though, too, is stunning.
Ma Belle Evangeline. This is another song where Jim Cummings just slays. I love the Kiss the Girl-esque animation. Like, this whole thing is... you don't see it coming. And I think that's what makes it so special, is you don't expect Ray to have a ballad, and Ray has a ballad, and it's excellent.
It's perfect. No notes.
Dig a Little Deeper. This is a great song that transcends this film. You do get some Jungle Book recycled animation, or what I believe is Jungle Book recycled animation with Tiana as she's dancing. This song, I think, also has become so popular because they do use it in nighttime spectaculars at Disney parks. Otherwise, I feel like people, I'm not going to say they forget about this, but it's almost there is where people go all of the time. And I think that Dig a Little Deeper kind of has a second life with Disney Parks fans.
I don't know. I think, I mean, at least for me, this and Almost There are the most memorable songs. I don't think that this is forgotten about, especially because of who's singing it. You have such a rich character with Mama Odie. Like, of course you have to give her a song. So this is such a highlight for her. And again, this is just another perfect example of how Randy Newman is taking everything about this setting and he's able to utilize it, because now you've got another type of music by incorporating gospel. I love how it starts off as a catchy song inside Mama Odie's treehouse, and by the end of the song, you've got her. It's like the ending of Can't Wait to Be King. You've got all of these animals coming together. They're outside. You've got this beautiful glow of the sunlight and all these flamingos. I love how they land the plane at the end of this song, and you've got the entire choir singing with her. It's so great.
Final thoughts on The Princess and the Frog.
I'll go first.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be quick. This is going to be quick.
I cannot even tell you how much I enjoyed revisiting this film this week. Admittedly, it is not one that I rewatch nearly enough, and not because I don't like it or didn't like it the first time. It's just that when I go back and I rewatch, a quote unquote comfort film for me, I'm going to revisit the ones that I grew up on. I'm going to do Little Mermaid. I'm going to do Aladdin. I'm going to do Pete's Dragon. I'm going to do Pirates, even though that was later in life. That is like my comfort movie. But there's no reason that this shouldn't be, because it feels so much like those films that we grew up on in the Renaissance era. And I think that is because all due credit goes to Clements and Musker. This is another banger from those two. They cannot miss. They figured out a way to take everything that we loved about the Renaissance era, make it contemporary, and deliver such an important message. you couldn't have picked better directors and writers to represent the 50th animated film for Disney. This is Disney storytelling at its finest. This film is perfect.
Yeah, I have no other notes. It's a perfect film. It's one that, I haven't revisited enough for no reason more than the way that you have your handful of go-tos. I have my handful of go-tos, but I feel like this is one that's going to slowly creep its way into becoming a go-to. That's how good this movie is.
You know what the most impressive thing about it is? You couldn't compare it to Ghostbusters. We just made it through an entire episode.
I think I've just been so excited with the Horror Nights announcement that we're getting Ghostbusters Frozen Empire at Halloween Horror Nights this year that I've been just kind of distracted. See? There's always a way to work it in. We are interested in hearing what you have to say about The Princess and the Frog. You can join the conversation on social media on all major platforms at Monoreel Radio, or you can send us an email, monoreelradio@gmail.com. News of the week is coming up, but first, a quick break. Now that we live in Florida and spend a lot more time in Disney World, you know we love to share our park experiences with you, especially in our dockside chats. However, telling you about our personal experience during a park day while sipping on a margarita is not the same thing as getting travel advice, which is why we are so happy to be partnered with our good friend Kelly at KMV Travel. You know Kelly from our reviews of Thor Ragnarok and Rogue One, and she has recently launched her own boutique travel company providing complimentary assistance with vacation planning. If you're thinking about booking a trip to Disney, you can visit kmvtravel.com and request Jackie as your travel advisor. We promise she will help with more than where to find the best margaritas.
Hey everyone, this is Brian down here in South Florida. I'm about 2 hours south of Disney, and when it comes to planning vacations, Jackie's the way to go. When it came to booking my family vacation for my 2-year-old daughter and my wife, you know, like everybody, I immediately went to the internet, started scouting prices. Just out of curiosity, I reached out to Jackie. She mentioned she was booking vacations for many people. So I gave her my list, my itinerary. She looked it over, and when she came back to me, she gave me her recommendations in regards to the parks. However, she also had new pricing associated with it. I've learned that going on my own doesn't necessarily mean that I'll be getting the best pricing. On top of that, it was stress-free. So all my vacations in the future are going to be through her because I don't have to think about it. She plans it. I give her some information in regards to what I want to do and create the itinerary for me. She's a market expert. She advised on which rides to attack first, which restaurants I should schedule on what day, and how to properly allocate my time to maximize my vacation. It was an amazing process. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
The Disney Adventure, one of the very exciting new cruise ships that are coming soon to the Disney Cruise Line, released some concept art, so to speak, talking about fully immersive experience, you know, my favorite term, fully immersive experiences at sea. Worlds inspired by Big Hero 6, Moana, Marvel, Toy Story, and then they kind of get some off the beaten path sort of IPs that you wouldn't necessarily assume you would be seeing at sea.
Right, because all of the cruise ships have a different theme to them, and there are, you know, certain characters that are more central to each ship. But I feel like I was seeing some artwork on there of things that we've not seen on any Disney Cruise Line. I thought I caught a treehouse. So I'm wondering if we're going to get, I mean, I don't think it's going to be Swiss Family Robinson. My wager would be on Tarzan.
Yeah.
But that could be cool, like a cool kids area if they have like a multi-level, you know, jungle gym that you could climb, things like that, or a skate park if they want to go the Broadway route. That's how they did it on Broadway.
I don't know about a skate park at sea. That seems like a bit of a stretch. But I guess if anybody could do it, it's Disney.
Yeah, and these cruise ships, I mean, they're just getting bigger and bigger. But I also saw Snow White on there. And
yeah.
I don't recall really any themed area to Snow White. And that should have been like one of your, being that it was the first animated film, I feel like it's a long time coming. They should have led with that one.
Yeah, and you got Rapunzel's Tower too, and you've got Finding Nemo is going to be represented. It just, I don't know, it just seems like you're pulling from too many things. I'm not sure how cohesive this is.
You know, it's funny that you say that because I mean, that's sort of the routes that the parks have gone these days, right? That's why, you see Moana everywhere, is because they want every member of the family to find the characters that they like, no matter which ship you're on, no matter which park that you're in. So it's not a surprise that there are a ton of IPs that are represented, but it's funny that you say that now, because my wheels were sort of turning a little bit. And, I talked about how much I love New Orleans. That is a port. There are a lot of cruise ships that leave from there. And I was like, how cool would it be if Disney did something where it was like just a Princess and the Frog themed ship? Like if they did a smaller ship and it gave you that riverboat feeling, and, you step out of the city and onto the boat and it's just like one big continuation of the story. And how cool would that be if they are doing ships that are individually tailored to each movie? But they're not going to do that because these ships are enormous.
Yeah. Flavors of Florida coming back. One of our favorite festivals at Disney Springs.
It's the most wonderful time of the year. I've been waiting for this announcement, and I am so happy that we got it.
Yeah, going to be running July 1st this year through August 11th. The offerings are always a ton of fun. I think there's over 40 locations that are going to be participating this year. Last year was the year of shrimp. This year seems to be the year of Cuban. There's a lot of Cuban sandwiches. There's a lot of Cuban influence at Flavors of Florida this year.
Well, we better get crack-a-lackin' because I want to try it all. Some more news that we got that I thought was kind of, not interesting timing in the sense of it is halfway to the holidays. So I've been waiting for these Christmas announcements to come out. But what I thought was kind of odd was that they beat out the Eat to the Beat announcements. We still don't have our bands for the Food and Wine Festival, which is starting later this year. We have no idea when Sugar Ray and Hanson are going to be performing.
I know.
And yet we got the announcement of the return of Jollywood Nights. Well, we got, of course, Mickey's Very Merry Halloween Party. Good job, vacation planner. Very Merry Christmas Party, which is not a surprise.
Yeah.
And Jollywood wasn't a surprise for me. I kind of felt like, I know that there were a lot of complaints about it last year, but I kind of felt like, if looking at it from the perspective of it being a test run, I thought it was a great event, and I could only see room to build on it, which it seems like they are, because in the artwork that they released, they had a skating pond, and it looks like it's going to be in front of the Chinese theater, which I think is such a great use of that space. And it's smart for this event because there was a lot going on over at Echo Lake. There was a ton going on in Sunset Boulevard. And other than...
Didn't they just have a DJ thrown there last year?
I don't remember anything. They had something going on in the Pixar courtyard, and then the only reason we walked through there was to get to Nightmare Before Christmas. I don't recall anything going on, so I think that that's going to be a really cool addition this year. And they actually, immediately following the Christmas announcements, they released their discount deals for the last quarter of the year. So there's discounts being offered for fall and holiday travel. Florida residents, you're getting up to 40% off of hotel rooms, which I was taken aback by that number and pleasantly surprised.
A lot of people were pleasantly surprised to learn that, well, Genie Plus is gone, but it's not. It's now just called Lightning Lane. But the improvement that they've made, it's not free the way that it used to be. And for everybody pounding the table saying make it free again, guess what? It ain't never going to happen. What makes this an improvement, though, is that if you are a Disney Parks resort guest, you can start making your Lightning Lane reservations 14 days in advance. If you're not a park guest, but you have a dated ticket, you can start making Lightning Lane reservations 3 days in advance. So what it does is it brings back the ability for you to plan ahead. This is a feature that should have always been there.
Absolutely.
It never made sense that this went away. It's going to be starting on July 24th. The pricing is going to be flex pricing. That's just what it's going to be. They haven't given the pricing yet, but I do think that it's a step in the right direction, that they are putting the planning back into the hands of those who are going on these vacations and not just grabbing lightning lanes on the fly, running here, running here, running here.
I was thrilled by this announcement. I mean, as thrilled as I can be, let's not forget, once upon a time, you had free entry into Disney and you paid for the rides that you wanted to go on. Then they flipped the script where it was one admission and you could get on every attraction that you wanted to get on. Let's not lose sight of the fact that now it's both. You're paying for your admission and you're paying per ride should you want to. But I do think that this is a much better, if we're going to be forced to use this feature, it is certainly much more streamlined than what they were doing. I think that the flex pricing is to be expected, but the most important thing here is that they enabled the ability, take that with a grain of salt because you still have to use the app for it and they're rolling out a new feature, God help us all. But you have the ability to plan in advance. And it is a way to get your head out of your phone so that you can enjoy the parks and be in the moment. So I think that that's a big win here if we are still going to be forced to pay for something that was once free. I also think, and what I really hope, is that it alleviates some of the pressure that is caused by the changes that they made to the DAS lines. I'm hoping that this is going to enable people to filter through faster so that those who still need DAS that were now cut out of it, I hope that this is a viable alternative for them so that they're not waiting in long lines. And I also hope that it brings more of a balance for everyone, because Genie Plus and Lightning Lane have definitely caused those queues to increase. I don't care what anybody says. I'm hoping that this is going to be closer to Fast Pass in that it alleviates the stress on both sides.
Thank you so much for joining us this and every week on Monoreel Radio. Monoreel Radio will always be free, but there are many ways that you can help support the show. Please give us a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Join the conversation on social media at Monoreel Radio on all major platforms. Share your favorite episodes with family and friends who may enjoy them. And of course, book your next trip with Jackie. Links to everything can be found at monoreelradio.com. We all get one story. Make yours a magical one.
On behalf of Monoreel Radio, we'd like to thank you for joining us. We'll see you at the movies, the stuff dreams are made of.